Let's speak to our male panellist, Troy Lum, listed as one of the top 50 young film execs to watch by Hollywood Reporter. He's the managing director of Hopscotch Films. He's helped develop local films The Sapphires, Somersault, Bra Boys, and Mal's Last Dance, on which he also serves as executive producer. And he has a fabulous female staff, very strong women in his company. So Troy, Susan says the female audience is there. Is it there, and is it worth serving them?
Yes, I mean, we actively seek female skewing films. Anecdotally, our research shows that if you're out on a date and you're, above 25 years old, then usually, and this is my experience as well, the female usually decides what film you're going to see. And what you've got to be very conscious of is we're an independent, and so when we're releasing movies, we have to release films that on its given weekend has a chance of taking some money. So we have to be the antidote to the studios. The studios are just making stupid, dumb man films. So we're actively looking for female films that we can bring an audience to. And I just while we're talking, I just took a note of some of the films that have been involved in by female directors in the last couple of years. We're talking The Kids Are All Right. The first Australian film we got involved in was Cate's wonderful Somersault. Bachelorette, Where Do We Go Now? Satellite Boy, Hysteria, Bright Star. We produced a film coming up called Adoration, The Women, First Position. And then we got films directed by men that are for women, like The Sapphires, Vicky Christina Barcelona, Mrs. Henderson Presents. We have 2 biopics coming up, one on Nina Simone, one on Grace Kelly. So we're very driven for that audience. But one of the things that I think we have to be conscious of is that what we're talking about mostly are studio-driven movies. And you've got to really get into the psyche of a studio executive at the moment. Now, all the studio's profits are down. They're down. They're probably at the lowest levels they've ever been. And the pressure on the studios is to produce less films. So that means that all these people want to save their asses and they want to make the least riskiest propositions they possibly can. And that doesn't mean spend less money. That sometimes means spend more money on dumb stuff. And unfortunately, the audience kind of decides. And when you have Fast and Furious, is it 6 now? I don't even know what number it's up to, taking $85 million in the first 3 days of release this weekend, then you can't really argue with those economics. What a studio would do is look at those numbers, and the way that any distributor makes money is that it's on a sliding scale. So your first weekend, you get the biggest amount of terms, and then it goes down every week. So a studio wants a film that's going to hit its target first weekend. Now, at the moment, culturally, those films are driven towards young males, because young males come out on the first weekend and they buy tickets to these movies. Female films are seen as sort of slow burn movies where they might not open as big, but they hang around for a greater number of weeks, but the profitability on those films is somewhat lower. It also, ancillary-wise, in terms of the DVD market, young men are still driving DVD. So if you're sitting as a studio executive, you're thinking, okay, I need a film that's going to play to 18 to 25 males. I need them to come on the first weekend. So what kind of films do I make? I make Fast and Furious 6. I make Iron Man 3. I make some sort of adventure thing. I need a superhero movie. And all of a sudden, that's their 10 slots filled.
But let's talk about the Australian context. And I'm sure Susan is trying to jump in on some of that, but I want to focus a little bit more of our time on the Australian. Who's the predominant audience for Australian films at the cinema in Australia?
I think we just need a bigger audience for Australian films in general so we can make a point. I mean, obviously, we released The Sapphires this year and intimately involved for a long period of time. We geared that film directly towards females. I'd like Australian films to more geared towards females, as I said, to compete with the domination of the studios. We need to tell great female stories. We need female superheroes. And what I mean by that is not Wonder Woman and Batgirl, because women don't really want to see that stuff either. I mean, men have these superheroes and they're just like these tough guys that, shag the occasional woman, save the world. And we can kind of get into that stuff, but women need a greater complexity. And when I was thinking about what a female superhero is now, and this is probably going to be quite a controversial statement, but I was thinking about Bridget Jones, because although women kind of loathe her, I mean, you can't doubt the success of those movies. And she's kind of like an ordinary woman that kind of wins the day. The problem is that we don't really have a lot of those stories. We don't have a lot of those stories in literature. of these women, who I think we need more of those. And I think people judge Bridget Jones, female judge Bridget Jones really harshly, but I actually think females judge female characters much more harshly than men judge male characters. Again, anecdotally, I'm in a company where there's 5 guys and 35 women, and every 2 weeks I'm showing them a movie or they're reading a script and we're assessing them. One of the movies that we've just produced is a film that was called Grandmothers, it's now called Adoration. It's by a great female French director called Anne Fontaine. It stars Naomi Watts and Robin Wright, and the story's about 2 women who sleep with each other's sons. And so I showed this film to the females in the office, well, just the whole office, who were mostly females. Walked into the screening afterwards. It was like I threw a hand grenade in there. People loved it, people loathed it. But what I found was that, every one of those women judged those women so harshly. Some of them really liked them, but there was all this commentary about them as mothers, them as partners, all this stuff. And I started thinking, if the film was about 2 guys who slept with each other's daughters, the blokes would be high-fiving each other in the screening room. And I think it's a really big issue, because it's so hard. I read, 20 scripts a week, and 90% of them are crap. Male, female protagonists, they're just bad. But it's so much harder to write a good female character because you're so aware of the way that character is going to be judged by other women. So we need to get better at doing that, and also not get better at writing, but also get less judgmental about these women. And they can be kind of bad mums. They can make decisions that aren't that good. What we always find when reading a script is that if a woman makes a bad decision as a mother, then we just say she's lost a female audience. And that's not because we're being judgmental men. It's because we actually show those films to women later, and women go, oh, I hate her. I hate her and I don't like the movie. And so I think culturally we need to get into a position where we're much more forgiving of our female role models, as men are, because men are, some of these guys that are superheroes are complete idiots, and we're just like, yeah, should blow it up, whatever. But, so...
And can I ask a question on that? So Martha said, and I would echo it, that she's not getting a lot of applications for films that have female characters, let alone female protagonists. And I would say, and I've heard it said anecdotally, I don't know whether you agree to it, that the people who go and see Australian films are often mature Australians and often led by women. We do not get many applications for development of feature films aimed at that audience. So there seems to really be a mismatch in the development slate of the agencies. Do you get many scripts like that, and what would you like to get more of?
No, we don't get many scripts like that. And if we do, they're kind of like kitchen sink drama type stuff, which, drama's a dirty word for any studio at the moment because they don't take enough money, and if you say period drama, their eyes just glaze over. I pitch this stuff all the time. And one of the major problems as well is that TV doesn't want to buy those movies. So, not only are you faced with, audiences being slow to respond to those films, but also TV don't want to buy them, the ancillary's low. I'm very hopeful that with the advent of digital and video on demand, that it's much more direct. You don't have to rely on a middleman buying. If you go to a Kmart or Coles or JB Hi-Fi, there's usually some bloke who's deciding what DVDs are on the shelf and the way they're racked up. So it's kind of informing your decision about what you're buying without even you knowing that. So what I'm hoping with digital is that because you're just choosing off a catalogue, that it's much more direct and you're making your own choices without being kind of guided. But the funny conversation is how cynical the film business is. When we produced this film, I said, called Grandmothers, and we had to change the name because grandmothers, people sleep with their other son, called grandmothers, it's not really that sexy. And so when we were talking to the American buyers, we got an American sale and they said, well, going through title changes, and every single title they came in started with the letter A. And I was like, I don't get it. There's all these other titles we could choose from, and it was because they wanted to come first on the VOD catalogue list. Yeah. So call your next film Aardvark, and you get
So just on that point about the guys choosing what goes on the DVD shelves. So I just noted, you're saying that you direct a lot of your counter-programming, you're directing your material towards a female audience, and you have a lot of female acquisition staff, which is fantastic. I don't see that, I don't know if you see it in the other distribution companies, many women in Australia. And I wondered internationally, the sales agents, the distributors and buyers overseas, are you seeing a growing number of women?
I think there is in terms of the buying acquisitions community, I would say that it's very much 50-50 towards women and men. It's not so much that we're not wanting to buy the stuff, it's just not enough of it in volume for us to really consider. And when it is, I tell you, we really go after it. I mean, especially in this country where, films like The Iron Lady or Marigold Hotel or Quartet, I mean, these films are like gold dust for us. So, we're actively searching for those films. I think from an Australian perspective, our big problem is that we don't do rom-com very well at all. And also, the experience of, being, say, a single woman in her 30s or being a single mum, I mean, there should be more heroic stories or fun stories about that experience rather than the kind of drama of how difficult it is. Because men seem to be able to turn those things into The Hangover or whatever, So I think it really does come down to we want this product, we want these films, we want these stories. So it's not from our perspective, we're not trying to hold anything back. We really want to open it up. Yeah. But I think, from an artistic perspective, the responsibility needs to be taken to actually write those characters and get those stories and whatever we can do to facilitate that, I think is going to be a good thing for all of us.
And I just want to touch on one more thing with you before we move on to Jan. So I know that, most of the Australian films are playing, at least internationally, the international quality art house arena, and that is very dependent on festival selection and reviews. So as I said, there have been a couple of interesting studies out of the US. One was the Sundance one, that the films directed by women got shorter reviews, and there's a very documented trend in publishing that there's many women authors, but male authors are reviewed in much higher numbers. And another study said that the number of critics, there's about 85% men, 15% women, and they're both, of course, looking at the same amount of films by the body of men and women directors, who again are mostly men. However, male critics, according to the study, were much more likely to review films by male directors, and female critics were significantly, they still reviewed less films by female directors because there were less of them, but they were more likely to review female critics. And the other thing is that, I don't know, festival selectors, the heads of festivals and sections still seem to be mostly male. I'm just wondering, do you see any of that playing at all?
Yeah, it really upsets me. Cannes really upsets me because, it is an interesting statistic about how many women are in competition, but I also like to see how many directors below the age of 40 are in competition, because I could tell you the Cannes selection next year. It'll be Coen Brothers, Almodovar probably, Wong Kar-wai. If there's a Ken Loach movie, he'll be in there. It's infinitely boring. As a buyer, we go to Cannes, I find it really boring. We don't even consider most films in competition because it's just by all the old stages. So I think that's kind of a generational thing as much as it is a gender bias thing. We're not really promoting young filmmakers in that way. Sundance do a better job of it, but in terms of the kind of prestige festivals, it's still, these old dudes that are, seriously, some of these movies I don't even bother watching anymore because they're just so of a kind of, it's just sort of the same thing being churned out all the time. Yeah, it's almost like the definition of competition at Cannes is a brutal masculinity, and that's what it should be. Yeah, some of these films aren't even seen by it's just like, okay, I've got a film that's ready, well, you're in because you've been in it for the last 5 years.